Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voice Like a Lion podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pemberton, and today we have someone I'm really interested to get to know their story and their background and what they are building. So, this is David Berg. He is the creator, the founder of Commander.ai. I'm really fascinated to learn more about this story with Commander because I haven't really heard that much about it. Like you and I, we connected on LinkedIn through the Antler program, which is also very interesting. I would love to hear about your experience with it. We had a couple of other co-founders on the show not too long ago. So just being able to hear different people's point of view of the same thing is really interesting because you and I can go through the same experience and experience it differently. So David, welcome to the show, and we'll just dive straight into it.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Stephen. Yeah, thanks for having me on. You touched on a couple things. I'm a founder and CEO of Commander AI. We are a business to automate sales cycles for companies specifically in waste management and trucking. I come from a background, and so I've been in garbage trucks and waste management for the last 7 years at various sales roles, and there wasn't a real product for that market. It's very old school. People are still writing on pen and paper. And so I said, there's got to be a better way to do that. And that's what led to Commander AI.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit more about that because not very many people I come across have been in the waste management, especially in the trucking side of it all. So how did you go from being the person that was in sales, doing this kind of work, to now creating an AI around it? Where'd you get that idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it started as like any other salesperson, right? You're just looking to get a deal done. I had a system that worked for me when I was in sales and trucks. A lot of the guys that are in that industry have been grandfathered in for 20, 30 years. And so I was using, Salesforce and HubSpot and kind of baseline CRMs. I wasn't using anything really techy.
Yeah.
And then, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And even as I was working in another company, I still had that desire to eventually build something on my own. And so when the AI wave started to come in, I looked at different avenues as far as where I could leverage that in my own sales cycle, whether it's, as I'm sure you're familiar with, like Firefly, which is a meeting conversation recorder. And I said, there's got to be a way to pull this into sales. And at the time, this was about, I want to say 2021, early 22. There wasn't anything really that was helping salespeople automate the cycle. There was, different avenues as far as CRM enrichment and data enrichment. But I said, I'm in an industry where none of these guys use anything. I'm probably the most technical person in this industry, right?
Yeah.
Being younger and in that space. And so I messed around a little bit with my own, sales cycles, leveraging, different AI, ChatGPT, and so on. Got with my co-founder, who's very technical, has 20 years plus of experience. And, we said, let's build something for this space that will help people that are brand new and also people that are more senior that maybe aren't familiar with anything technical.
That's really cool. So when you're doing that, like, because I understand with Firefly, there's also another one that I see all the time now. It's Fathom. And especially when I go into Zoom rooms and I see that, I always just say, I'm saying hello to the VA that's in the room because that's basically, it's taking notes for you and it's keeping that meeting concise. But what did you do to be able to pull those notes in? And you don't have to get into like the technical, this is how we coded it in.
Sure.
But I'm fascinated by the actual process because when I think of sales process, there's a couple different things that come to mind, and I would love to know which one of them you went down, or if there's like a third one that I haven't discovered yet. Is there's the one sales process which is like this is the top of the funnel, and then we go down to the bottom of the funnel, or there's the sales process of when you have the first interaction with somebody. This is how the first call goes. You have this discovery call, and then after the discovery call, you have a more in-depth sales call. So with doing the Firefly stuff, were you pulling in your meetings from that and then like putting in the ChatGPT to see how you could have done it better? Or is that to just like increase your likelihood of the next sales call? What did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, that specific component to it, I often remember being on calls and then going to follow up with that prospect, and one, forgetting exactly what it is that they asked for, and two, as far as what the follow-up would be. So I took those notes. I used ChatGPT not just to formulate a response to that customer, but also what would the follow-up be, right? Sometimes you're limited in the scope of what you know.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of broaden that reach. And then in building Commander AI, to answer that question, we started the initial outreach, right? So completely cold outreach, which is something that I'm very good at on a manual level. And then we want to stay with the user all the way until the sale is closed. So a lot of different tools that are out there kind of say, hey, we'll get you, that first email out, we'll book you that meeting, but then it's up to you. In using Commander AI, there's very little user involvement. You're reliant almost entirely on us, and then you can kind of, come in as you feel, you need to.
So take me a little bit deeper with that. So it's like if
Yeah.
I was working with Commander AI and I'm going through my sales cycle, how does it work? Like if do you go find does it go find the people for me, take them through the whole sales cycle, and then I'm just kind of on the end collecting a paycheck, or what does it look like?
Yeah, great question. So there's two paths. As I'm sure you know, there's field-based sales reps, which are guys that
Yep.
are like medical sales, equipment selling on the ground. There's more sophisticated enterprise prospecting, which is all digital, Zoom calls, and so on. So let's start with that enterprise. So an enterprise account, let's use TriNet, right? Very famous HR company. They would have their sales reps go on our site. They would log in, initially integrate their CRM, their email, and their calendar. Commander will then use that data that's currently in their CRM to identify new prospects that they aren't currently engaging with, as well as reviving their current leads in their pipeline that maybe aren't being engaged. So it's doing that in, sort of an agent hub, building that prospecting engine, then crafting emails to those prospects. If an email isn't responded to, it'll go to the next best person in the company. And so this is another cool thing that we're working on filing a patent for is it's going in a hierarchy. So if the best, buyer in the company doesn't respond, there's 10 other people that maybe will respond. And so it's going down that line like that. Once that meeting's booked, then you have the call on your calendar. It's all done automatically. You don't have to do any of that. We provide you what we call actionable intelligence, which is what to say to the buyer, how to communicate to the buyer, what it is they're looking for, what their budget is this quarter. We're doing that through reading SEC filings, 10Ks, news channels, their social media feed. So think of it as like an aggregator of all things that are relevant to your sales cycle.
That's awesome. That's actually really cool because especially going through, and I've heard of different tools that do part of it. There's been multiple people. I won't just say one person. There's been multiple people where they're charging $500 plus a month, and their tool is going to basically it's going to scrape LinkedIn. It's going to find you a potential lead, and then it'll message, and then that's it. You got to handle the rest of the sales cycle. So I think it's really cool that your software, your AI, will actually go, especially down the hierarchy. Because, and I like that it starts from the top and not just start with the gatekeeper, because like you try to go to the actual decision maker first and then work your way down. I think that's really smart. But what does that actually? Let me ask. This is going to be a much more technical question, and if this is outside of your field, it's more for the co-founder. Cool.
Yeah.
But when I think of it from an email perspective, there's when it comes to like email automations, a lot of times, depending on if you put links in it and different things, you can get flagged, go straight to spam, all that. If you have you seen from using it or from the clients you've had using it, if they're going down the hierarchy, right? So if it's sending an email and it's going down, it doesn't get responded to from the first couple people. Do you notice that its efficiency becomes less, or does it stay generally the same?
Yeah, great question, and I can answer that. So it drops a little bit as
Okay.
expected,
Yeah.
but the nice thing is that as we've seen, initially the first, second, or third person will give us some sort of response that'll guide the software. So it's almost an anomaly in the use cases where you're going all the way down. If we're at number 7 in the company, the likelihood is you probably won't be selling to that company,
Yeah.
but we'll know at that point. So it isn't the initial outreach or use case.
That makes sense. So is this only for that one industry, or is this something where you're thinking you want to start here to be more niched in and then expand in the future? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, we broke out for a sec, but I think I got the question. You asked if we would want to start in this business and then expand,
Yep.
or
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
our yeah. So it's definitely not the end goal. It's a very big industry that I think most people don't really know how big waste management is. It's
I don't.
recession proof, right? It's a multi-trillion-dollar business,
Wow.
and there's so many different players in the space. There's the guys that pick up the trash. There's the ones that control the contracts for that. There's the city and government which gets involved. There's the companies that build the trucks and then build the bodies for the trash pickup. And all of them would be customers of Commander AI because they all have a sales cycle and they all aren't technical. So that to me was just low hanging fruit. I had many relationships in that space. I've been able to acquire customers fairly quickly. Just, hey, I was selling you guys trucks and now I'm selling you software that'll help you, close more deals. So it's kind of a natural flow in the sales cycle with them. And I'm also, of course, using my own software to engage with them. And then, saying, hey, I actually got a hold of you via the same way that I'd like your company to be doing sales. Beyond that, I want to expand to other manufacturing sources, whether it's concrete, whether it's construction, but what we call industrial, we call it Midwest businesses is where I'd like to stay. And I think it's way too competitive in enterprise sales. There's way too many decision makers, and why compete in this space when I have an advantage elsewhere?
That's great. The mindset is what I really want to highlight because especially in this day and age where people our age and younger is it's all about being online, right? Like everyone wants to have some kind of software as a service or e-commerce and do whatever. But that is because it is hot, then you're going to compete with everyone else. But being in an industry not only that you understand, but there's low competition, and with it being as big as it is, it reminds me of a gentleman I just had on my podcast. His episode will air probably in the next couple of weeks. His business has been around for 18 years, and he is doing very well. And all he did was just focus on local and state governments. And that's it. And he's done that for 18 years, and they are big. They're one of the biggest players in the game for local and state governments. And it's basically finding the stuff that they were giving away. He figured this out because he was a politician in this town, and he figured out that they were giving away police cars for $300, and the Kelly Blue Book was $3,000. So these
Wow.
people would come in, buy it for 300, and then they would flip them. And so what he did was he created a software that then he created a platform you can list this stuff on. And he said the first time that they listed it on there, he got a phone call from this like local municipality, and they said, "Hey, there's something wrong with your software because somebody it says that there's a bid in for $3,000 for this car that we usually give away for 300." And he said, "No, that's real. Like that's somebody actually wanting to give you $3,000." And what's fascinating is he didn't expand. Like he expanded in that industry, but he didn't go outside that industry. And I think that that's a great way to look at it because I didn't realize how big waste management was until a couple of years ago. I read this story, and I would love your
Yeah.
your input on this story. But I read a story. It happened in Italy, where the mafia in Italy, they stopped doing like drug running and doing everything else, and actually went into waste management. They did illegal waste management, went around charging people less than the everyone else, taking the trash, going to an active volcano and throwing it in the volcano.
Yep.
So and I just thought that was so fascinating. And they said it like when the people got arrested, they said, "Why would you do this?" They of course didn't catch the kingpin of it all yet, but they asked them, like, "Why would you do this?" And they said, "It's a multi-billion-dollar company or thing. It's like I go to jail for a few weeks instead of going to jail for the rest of my life." It's like, of course I'd do this. So
Exactly.
I think that's so crazy. I didn't know that, but what's your thoughts on a
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
like that?
1000%. It's still very prevalent today, especially. I'm not going to call it anybody specific because some of them were actually customers of mine, but specifically in New York City and the Bronx and in Brooklyn, it's kind of grandfathered of mafia, right? So these are like the grandchildren that aren't involved or never were involved, but it was a business that was handed down very much via mafia. In fact, a couple of years ago, New York City, and this is why they put in laws in place. There was several companies that got together and essentially threatened other companies to drop their prices, or they would, I don't know what they would do. But in doing that, they were able to outprice everybody else and basically win all the contracts. And so they had a monopoly over the town. And then the city of New York came in and said, "Hey, we're going to run most of the waste management, at least in Manhattan and the boroughs. And you guys have a very subset category of it." So they're able to do whatever they want in their little town, but they're not able to kind of control the rest of the region there.
Yeah, that's wild. I
Yeah.
never I never would have expected that my garbage would be the thing that people would fight over. But that's honestly
Yeah.
super fascinating. And I think that it's really cool when you were talking about with Commander AI going into that industry and the way that you're approaching it, the mindset of approaching it in that way and helping tighten up those sales cycles. Because to me, I mean, I've been in business for going on 4 years now, really been in business for about five. But being in the B2B space, I go, "Oh man, this would be great for just everybody." But for you, as you go, "Yeah, maybe, but I'm just going to stay right here." Because that is really where the riches are going to be for you and for your company is not only in what you understand, but it's also where the competition is low. And
Completely.
so when you approach people who are in this industry and you say, "Hey, I actually reached out to you using my own thing. And this is what I would love to see you guys using." What's the response look like? Like how do they typically respond to you? Especially some of the old heads, the people who've been in business for a lot longer and they say, "Ah, no, I'm good with pen and paper and my landline."
Yeah, great, great, exactly. I think that the only reason why they're able to respond and actually engage with me is because I was in that space. As you mentioned, those guys are very old school. If you're a software guy trying to sell trash guy software, they'll just slam the door in your face. Um,
Yeah.
Given that they know I was in the industry, there's like a level of mutual respect there. Typically, the response has been, "Hey, this is great. It sounds like it's way above my pay grade," or I don't understand this. I don't know what AI is. I don't want anything to do with it. When that happens, we say, "Hey, look, let me give it to you for a week, 14 days. Try the product. If you're not satisfied with it, if it's too complicated, don't ever use it again. But I doubt that will be the case. And we've been able to, there's obviously anomalies to that, but
Yeah,
most people are willing to try out the product, at least from that point forward.
that's cool. So is that typically the way that you approach it? Do you guys do like demos with people? Because I've seen it so many different ways when it comes to softwares. Is you have the free trial, so you got like 7 days or 14 days. Use it. Let me know how you like it. And then I've also seen it where if it's a software, Riverside does one that what we're using right now, where
Yep.
for them is they don't give you a trial, they'll do a demo. So it's you get on, then somebody walks you through. This is how you use it, and this is blah 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 blah. To me, I like the trial better. I mean, I guess because I'm a little more techie, I'll figure it out. But I can also understand the appeal of a demo.
Yeah, we do a demo, kind of a high level demo where I'll show you the product working. I'll show you the functions of it in a 30-minute initial demo call. I don't like to resort to trials, as you mentioned. I just feel like if the product is really adding value, the user will get so much value for free from the get-go. They're not going to want to pay, $100,000 to $500,000 licensing fee once they've already experienced something for free. So I don't resort to, a free trial, but if the user is kind of, I don't know about this, then I'll offer it as an option from that point.
Yeah, I like that. There's a company, and they did something that was really interesting. Is they have their own AI system, does outreach and all that stuff, kind of what we talked about earlier. But one thing that they do that they don't outright offer is A, they don't have a free trial, and B, they have that demo call. They have the 30-minute demo call, and then when somebody's like, I don't really know if this is for me. I think the product is typically like $150 a month. That's how much their software is. And they say, hey, I get that. And at $150 a month, that I can see how you would see that being a little bit expensive. It's like 150 for their low end, 300 for their high end. And they said, here's something I can do. So unfortunately, we don't have a trial, but I can do this $25 one where you get in, you get most of the features. You're not going to get any of the trainings. You're not going to be able to get any of the additional features, but you get this. So you'll be able to see how it works. And then you just go play around with it. Let me know if you like it or not. And if you don't, it just stops doing it. You'd say one time $25. And that's something that they don't offer unless it gets to the point where somebody's really asking for a free trial. And what I think is interesting psychologically, and you being in sales, I would love to get your take on this, is psychologically, if you give somebody something for free, the likelihood of them taking a lot of action on it is much less likely than if they paid for it. Even if they paid something. Like if they paid $25, it may not be a huge lump sum of money, but to them, there's at least some skin in the game. At least from my own businesses, I've noticed that when I get somebody's skin in the game, at least a little bit, then they're much more willing to put in the effort. But when I give away the same thing for free, they typically don't take any action. I'm just like, I had somebody pay me a lot of money for this thing. And yet when I give it to you for free, you don't use it. What happens?
Completely. Yeah. I completely agree with you, especially in high ticket item industries like trucks, right? I was selling, $500,000 product, and I would never mention price with the customer ever. I would never say we're cheaper, we're better priced, we're competitively priced. I would avoid the word price all the way until the deal was closed. And exactly to that point, as soon as price becomes a factor, the value of the product itself immediately becomes diminished. You don't have the same level of appreciation for it. Everything kind of goes out the window, and then you're fixated on something that's not even relevant. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And I think that that's a great perspective when difference between value based and price based. I mean, if you're, especially in your industry, not necessarily in your industry, but basically in the software as a service industry, if you go price based, you're going to price yourself out of existence. Like you're not going to be able to, same thing with e-commerce. I mean, I've done e-commerce, selling stuff online forever. And I remember we did $1 million in a year and then ended up with less than $100,000 of kept. So why? Because we were competing on price. We're on Amazon. And when you compete on price, you're just fighting to literally the bottom cent. And that is not where you want to be. You'd rather be the highest price option and have less customers, but be making more actual profit margin. So I think that value comparatively to price is the best way to go about it. And when you're working with these clients, especially these people who they come on board, what does the results look like? Like with somebody that you've seen, I know that you guys haven't been around a long time yet, so you haven't had a long time horizon to say, well, we had this guy, he was a 2-truck company, and then he grew to $100 million company in 6 months. But with the customers, the clients that you have worked with, what have you seen for their results? Like what have they been able to accomplish through it?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, as I mentioned, we've only been in business for just over under a year now,
Yeah.
but the successes that we've seen thus far have been the simplicity of uploading a CRM with really no activity, and then first generating 100 new prospects for clients, and then
Well,
engaging at a high conversion rate with them. It varies by industry, it varies by segment, but people are already astonished when they're like, "Hey, I had no idea what happened. Now there's 30 new customers that I can reach out to. I'm getting responses. My inbox is full. I have meetings on my calendar." As a junior level sales rep and even somebody who's older and non-technical, that's the greatest gift you can ask for. And so that's just a small piece. I'm sure, we talk in 2, 3 years from now, I'll say, "Hey, this company went from 2 to 20 million, from 1 to 100 trucks." It's a little early for that,
yeah.
but that's the initial kind of, success that we're seeing now.
No, which is great. I mean, just as you said, especially in the sales game, you could be the best salesperson in the entire world. You could be Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. If you have no leads, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're just talking to the walls, it literally makes no difference. You have to get in front of somebody. So to be able to go in and do that, to be able to add, even if they were having 5 meetings a month, we were doing 5 sales calls a month, and you take that to 10, you have doubled the opportunities for this person. Now, if they were closing one every five, maybe they'll close two every 10. That has doubled their business. That has doubled their commissions. That has doubled the overall revenue of the company. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. And that's why I wanted to explain it that way. I don't want people to glaze over. It's like, well, it just sounds like more meetings.
Right.
Yes, but that is the lifeblood of business. If you don't have sales calls, there's no way you're going to have sales actually happening. So I think
Complete.
that that's really important. Like that is a huge thing. But as you've been exploring this, what has been some of the things that you've noticed going from doing the sales to now being a founder of an AI company? What has been some of the struggles or setbacks that you've run into?
Yeah. I never like to look at anything as a setback or a struggle. I'm sure you've heard this cliche term before, but everything is really a step in the right direction, even the
Yeah,
things
that's good.
that really aren't. But what I would say is my non-technical background has forced me, but also I've enjoyed it, is relying on other players on my team, whether it's our engineers, my co-founder, and really, trusting them entirely, which is something as a salesperson you don't do, right? It's all about you. You
Yep,
control the sales cycle. And so being able to sit back to an extent and saying, "Hey, these guys will handle that part of it. I'll handle the raising the money, the selling, and all of that," has been, somewhat of a challenge for me. But thankfully, the trust is there, and I know those guys will do the right thing.
that's good. That's something that I've heard a couple different times from different founders. Is just like having the trust. That's a big part of our business, which is funny. Is for us, we go in and we're usually working with companies that are 1 million to 10 million, and they're very good at one thing. Like the founder is great at one thing. For us, it's in e-commerce, they're great at knowing how to sell stuff. But what they don't realize is when they start scaling, they start bringing on these agencies, and they're having to trust them. It's like, I think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but if you don't have the prowess in those areas, we come in and we just say, hey, they are doing it, or hey, they're not doing it, or hey, here's a plan that help them do it better. But I think that it's great that you found a team that works really well for you, because unfortunately, especially in the agency space, which is, I know that's not what you're in, you have a co-founder,
Yeah,
and that's the best way to do it. If you're hiring for your weakness so you can focus on your strength instead of trying to strengthen the weakness, that didn't make a ton of sense. Like, strengthen your strengths, hire somebody for the weakness. But because unfortunately, when people hire out and they start bringing in agencies, unless you know what they're really doing, if they took your calendar from 1 to 2 meetings and they say, hey, this is what we did, it's like, but do you know how much you spent to actually get that extra meeting? And that's what I love about your software is there's basically no extra fee. There's not ad spend. You're not trying to figure out, putting SEO on a page. Like, you just have a software that goes and does it.
exactly. No overhead costs. Again, it's nice being a CEO that can sell. Right. They always say, you have to be a salesperson to an extent if you're going to start a company.
Yep.
So my vision is to have a 0-person sales team. Myself and the software will do all of it. As we scale, we'll have, customer success individuals, but it would defeat the purpose of the product that I'm building to have a full-time business development rep or an SDR in my company. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the vision for that.
I love that. That's actually a fascinating outlook because so with the way the software is built now, let's say in 5 years that you have expanded to have 200 clients. Is there a cap on how much you can do as far as outreach? Is there a cap on the inflow that you can take? Because it sounds like if you're doing because we hear it online from different influencers and people where it's like if you're doing 100 outreaches a day, but if this thing's doing talking to 1,000 people a day, I mean, it's talking to 365,000 people a year. Let's just say it can actually sustain that amount of inflow.
Yeah, it absolutely can. But what I would say is that the inflow and the outflow is actually less than you may think. And that's part of our secret sauce, is that we're not interested in sending out 1,000 emails a week on clients' behalf. To your earlier point, if you go from 2 meetings to 5 meetings a month, that's tremendous value.
Yes.
And one thing where we want to set ourselves apart is, hey, we're very targeted. We're just understanding the consumer landscape. We're not going to be hitting up the same client over and over again to piss them off and have them not engage with you. So it's extremely targeted. And if we have a sense that a company cycle is closed, we won't reach out to them. In spite of the user wanting us to reach out, we're, hey, with all due respect, we understand where they're at. They are not interested in buying your product now. I understand you want to sell to them, but trust us, we'll follow up in Q2. So it's really thinking beyond what the emotional mind of a salesperson would think.
So what does that look like a little bit deeper for? How do you make that decision? So is it because of responsiveness? Is it lack of responsiveness that dictates the amount of reach out? What is your theology around the actual touch points with these people?
Yeah, many factors. The two that I'll highlight here, one is data that we're pulling, again, as I mentioned, from SEC filings and 10Ks. This data is so valuable and often overlooked by salespeople. They're just not, worldly enough to look in those places. But understanding that a company has $100 million in their CapEx budget and has spent 98 of it already is tremendous in knowing what their capacity is to buy your product. So that'd be one avenue, right? If a company's burnt out from a budget perspective, we won't reach out to them. Number two is oftentimes salespeople do this. When somebody in a company tells you that, hey, they don't want to say we're not interested outright, but they'll say something along the lines of, circle back with me next week.
Yeah.
Don't circle back with them next week. If they want to talk to you, they will. And so just picking up on sort of mental cues and my own background in sales and putting that together as a complete package, as well as looking at the competitive landscape are kind of the angles that we're building this premise off of.
So you do research. That's crazy because
Shocking, yeah.
That is shocking.
Yeah.
That you would take a little bit of time and do a little bit of research. That's something that I don't actually hear a lot of people talk about when it comes to sales. Everyone wants to just have leads come to them. They just talk to them and then close them. It's like, but how do you know if they're a good lead for you? This is what I ran into in my own business.
Yeah.
I went from doing a few meetings a month to doing like 70. And when that happened, I thought, okay, business is about to explode, but it was the wrong people. I was talking to the wrong people the whole time. So this year it's been significantly less meetings, but they're with the right people. So
Right.
For me, I would rather spend 90% of my time doing the research to do the outreach to then get on the right calls instead of doing it inverse, where 10% of the time is a research, 90% of the time I'm on meetings. That's eating away at my time. I can't do anything else. And unfortunately, it didn't really lead to anything. It led to another meeting with somebody else. It led to another meeting with somebody else. It led to another meeting with somebody else just to find out, it's like, wait, this isn't even the right company.
Right.
So I think that right there, that is gold. To just do a little research.
Exactly. Yeah. Denzel Washington once said, he said, don't confuse movement with progress. And
Yes.
that's kind of our thesis for building this product, right? Salespeople can run around like a chicken with their head cut off, kind of just spraying and praying everywhere. We're the complete opposite of that, right? It's like, look, one meeting, right people, right place. Buying and selling should be more of a nice conversation and good interaction than trying to shove something down somebody's throat. And hopefully we can change the way sales are done in a larger landscape. That's kind of our mission statement, but hyper fixating on the waste management business first.
Yeah, I love the way that you approach sales in a non-sleazy, hard selling kind of way. You approach it from a much more relational based way, it sounds like. So I appreciate more people out there like us. But I want to give you a chance to talk about Commander AI and how people can interact with it. How can the listeners support you on your journey?
Yeah, thanks for that. So as I'm sure you've seen in your slight research of where we are, we're very much in stealth mode. We're keeping a lot of things close to the chest. Pricing isn't available online. The intricacies of the product aren't available online. But with that said, if you do want to test out our product, you do want to schedule a demo, go on commanderai.com. Simply, it'll prompt you to request access. An email will come to myself and my co-founder, schedule a time with you, and then we can take you through the product. We're also active on LinkedIn, my own social, right, at David Berg. And we'll be rolling out more information and more updates as we do progress there. But for now, the best way of access would be via our website.
Awesome. David, I appreciate you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking us down the journey of waste management and your software and how you're revolutionizing an industry. It's actually been a really fascinating conversation. I wasn't honestly sure how it would go because we
Yeah,
didn't talk a whole lot before. We just kind of jumped right into it. A lot of scheduling issues, more from my side. I apologize again,
no worries.
but it was great. I appreciate you being here today.
Awesome, Stephen. Thank you for the time. Look forward to seeing it.
And for everyone that is listening, I'll see you in the next episode.
Great. Take care.